Good afternoon, everybody, and it's my great pleasure to introduce two ladies from Cenin, which is the company that works from what used to be Strawberry Down Airfield, and where the wind turbines are top of the hill there. So, Joanne, who is over there, Joanne is Joanne Goddard, and she's the education lead and community liaison for Cenin, but she also has her own company, sustainable and outdoor education, and it's called Go Explore Learn. She was Sustainable Development Officer for Swansea Council for 10 years, and then, in her own words, she escaped to the National Botanic Gardens of Wales, which sounds a very good place to escape to, and she was Sustainable Development and Outdoor Education Lead for that. She's going to give us an overview of Cenin's current developments in sustainability, but I'm also going to introduce Jess King. Now, some of you may remember, about 6 years ago, Jess came and talked to us about Cenin. Jess has now moved her role, changed her role to project coordinator, and she designs projects and takes them through to planning. But she is going to co-present this with Joe. So please give a warm welcome, please, to Joe and Jess.
Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah? Okay. So thank you for coming today. I understand it's sort of the first time that you've met in this capacity since COVID. We're really pleased to be able to come today and talk to you about the work that Cenin is currently doing in the area and in other areas across Wales. And I've been with the company now since September, so my remit is basically education and community liaison. And you know, Cenin is basically a renewable company that looks at infrastructure, and it is committed to developing greener power for Wales. Let me just see if I can use this. Nope. Can I just have a little bit of... So, we're a Welsh company, we're a local company. And we are committed to delivering sustainable jobs, supporting local economic prosperity, and demonstrating this through our development. Cenin uses the natural resources that are on the planet, such as wind and solar, to help reduce carbon emissions, increase resource efficiency, and work towards long-term energy security. And I think with what's happening in the news at the moment with Ukraine, I think, you know, it's very much on the top of the agenda at the moment is one of is energy security and the rising prices of energy in this country. And just something for you to have a little think of. We live on an ever-increasing planet with over 7 billion people. Over the next 50 years, dwindling oil reserves, higher prices, and importing gas and natural resources is going to have a bigger impact on the planet, but it's also going to have a bigger impact on us. Okay, so people are going to obviously struggle to heat their houses. People are going to struggle to be able to afford to do that. Prices of food will rise. Prices of services will rise. So energy is something that's really becoming more and more important, and is becoming to a point where it really needs to be robustly looked at. So Wales currently uses, I always tell the children this, 3 times more resources than the planet can sustain. So Wales, we're not very sustainable in Wales as a population. We're not in Britain. I'm not singling Welsh people out. I'm Welsh myself. But we're not great at using resources well. We use 3 times more resources than the planet can sustain. We need to learn how to use resources better, more effectively. We need to learn how to create less waste, and the waste that we do create, we need to use to create energy and to create better ways of doing things. So Cenin is really committed to this, is really committed to a greener, more sustainable Wales. And in 2001, and I know that Jess will talk about this a bit later, we were recognised for our sustainable development work and awarded the Queen's Award for Enterprise. So we were really, really honoured to have that sort of recognition of what we're doing. So I don't know how many of you have been to Park Stormy in Bridgend. Can I have a show of hands? Has anybody come down to Park Stormy? Okay, some of you. So on Park Stormy, we've got a number of alternative technologies there. We have wind turbines. We have solar PV. We have an AD facility, so that's an anaerobic digester. That is actually owned by Severn Trent Green Power. We have battery storage, and we have a state-of-the-art house which has been developed to be energy efficient and to use energy in the best way. So the turbines there are absolutely amazing. When I take the children to, we had a group of students yesterday with year 3. They were 7-year-olds, and when they got off the bus and they took one look at this turbine, from literally underneath it, their little faces lit up. Okay? And because I think that to see a turbine at that close proximity, there is something amazing about it. I'm very passionate about wind turbines. And I'm passionate about them because they are creating green energy. Okay? They're not damaging the environment. Once they're up, and they are actually helping to produce a better form of energy than we're currently mostly using in the UK, if not across the world. When you come onto the site, I don't know if it was from the last time that you visited the site, one turbine looks very, very different to the other. And we looked at this yesterday with the children. And we've got T1 and T2, and I call them Terry turbine and Tina turbine, okay? Because one's larger than the other. And the second turbine, T2, the wing tips are very, very different. So the wing tips are longer, and they are more curved in design. So I think the second tip, Jess will look at this perhaps a little bit more in detail after, is the longer tip, and that is because wind turbines are becoming bigger in terms of their wingspan, their blade span. I call them wings, it's like the aeroplanes, but blade span, because it is more effective at harnessing the wind to produce energy. And we stand underneath them basically, and we just feel the force of nature, because we could, you can actually feel the wind being taken up by the blades. And it's quite amazing. I had some fantastic feedback from the school this morning to say that the children were really enthralled by what they saw. They understood why we need a greener future for their generation and future generations. So at Park Stormy, we actually produce three things, which is renewable energy, low carbon cement, and digestate. So the renewable energy is obviously from our wind and our solar. The low carbon cement is from our mineral work. So you probably know that cement is not great in terms of carbon footprint, but at Cenin, and I've been around the carbon cement, it's one of my passions, they really are looking in their research and development mineral lab at new ways of doing things. So although we're pretty good at doing it now, we've got low carbon cement, the people that work there are constantly looking to improve. They're constantly looking for new ways of doing things. And they digest it, which I found absolutely fascinating. So on the site, there are 3 large, which I can only describe as green containers, okay, across from the site. And what happens is that all of the green waste, so the bins, the food bins across South Wales, get taken to the plant, to the AD plant, where they're offloaded and they are put into a storage container where they are macerated with blades. They're macerated to such an extent that they become like a soup consistency. They pass into these storage containers and they start to heat naturally. And as they heat, I explain it to the children that it's basically like them wanting their dinner just before dinner time, where we start to hear tummies rumbling, okay? And the process of the soup digesting produces gas, and that gas is then harnessed and turned into energy. And it's amazing that from our food that we actually throw away after our dinner times and our lunch and our breakfast, that we can make clean energy from it. And one of the things I found really fascinating is I went into the plant just after Christmas. And when I walked into the plant, you can imagine the smell is quite pungent, to say the least. Okay, some people actually, I've told, are sick when they walk in there. I just about managed to keep myself together. But the amount of food that had been dropped off just after Christmas was incredible. And that was the waste that we buy and not use. Yes, it can be made into clean energy, but if that plant wasn't doing that, that food would just go to landfill, which is not a great way to dispose of our waste. So yeah, so we produced these 3 things on site. And some little facts from you. Park Stormy powers 12,000 homes. So the actual power that is created there is 12,000 homes. The site is energy efficient, basically. So all of the buildings are fed, the energy is fed from the renewables into the buildings. So that's the mineral plant, the office, which is the house. It's fantastic. In the winter, I quite happily sat in the offices because they are very cosy, aren't they, Jess? They're very, very cosy because obviously the power is green and it's free because it's from site production. It saves 200,000 carbon a year. It fertilizes, so what I was talking about, the digest it, fertilizes 500 acres of farmland. So when they actually capture the gas from the AD plant and they capture it and they make energy, the byproduct, which is a bit like, I don't know if anybody knows about sludge hoppers. It's something that I had to study many years ago. You have like a fly ash at the bottom with them, but with this you have a sort of it's a compound, which is basically the solid waste that's left. That is dried, and then that becomes fertilizer to then put on fields to grow again. So we've got a whole waste loop. It replaces 75,000 tonnes of high carbon cement. So our mineral works replaces that much high carbon cement. And I'm going to try, if possible, I'm going to ask my technical person here, if we can play that video here. If I press on this.
Video?
Yeah.
Has it got sound on it?
You don't necessarily need sound.
It should play.
We will do that at the end because I think we've got to get onto the Wi-Fi. So at the end, I'd see if I can get on the Wi-Fi and play that if we have time. Right. Okay? Yes?
What does carbon mean? I don't know what, I've never heard of carbon as a measurement term.
It's carbon dioxide. So basically...
So what is it, carbon? Is it meters, cubic meters?
So, it's tons.
It's tons of carbon dioxide.
Yeah.
And obviously carbon dioxide is not great for the planet.
I understand that. I've never seen
Yeah,
carbon.
yeah. So we measure it in that. And basically, you know, we talk in those terms when we look at reductions and we look at measures.
Because the big initiative for I think it's 2025, after that, is to try and absorb carbon dioxide, to reduce the carbon dioxide footprint, isn't it? That's what the government are trying to do.
Regen Council want to be net zero by 2030.
Right.
So that means that the levels of carbon we're not putting any out, so it'll be balanced.
Right.
So that's what net zero means. So that is what Regen Council actually want to achieve. But that is only, 8 years away? So as we will go on later in the presentation, 8 years isn't a very long period of time to actually get renewable projects in, planning and build.
Right.
So it is quite a target to meet, which is what we'll go on to now.
And the other, just one last thing, the high carbon cement that you're replacing, what do? Do you send it to other cement factories to include in their cement, or what?
So what we do is we're trying to be as sustainable as possible. So firstly, the entire cement plant is off-grid. They use power created on site. But secondly, we take in waste product. So we take in waste products from biomass plants, used to be Aberthaw Power Station before it closed down, steelworks, that sort of thing. We take in waste products. Half the time we don't really know what it is. So we've actually got cement labs on site which work out exactly what we're dealing with very sort of high-tech equipment. And then we make, it's not so much cement, it's more, so we've made ground stabilization products.
Right.
So for instance, so it's not your general building cement. If you were doing something domestically to your house, you wouldn't call us. It's very high technical stuff. So for instance, if you were building a solar farm and you had a really, really boggy field and you needed to get quite heavy machinery into that field and are going to get stuck in the mud, what we can do is we actually create a powder which you can put all over the ground where you want a road to be, and it will actually clamp with the ground and make a hard surface in 24 hours.
Thank you.
That also you can arrange it so in a year that product would biodegrade into the land and have minimal impact, or 5 years or 10 years you can actually tailor it to the demands. So it's not your domestic cement, it's very high specialist stuff.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
So Cenin really, they really work with the communities so that the communities are heard. You probably know that, most, nearly all developments of a certain size need to work with the public, find out what their opinions are, what their concerns are, more importantly, so that these can be addressed and there can be really good communication with the communities that they're working within. And they do that by demonstration. Okay, so they don't just talk about it, they demonstrate it. And we'll look at some of that now in detail. So we demonstrate local economic benefit by job creation. So on Stormy Down, obviously, there are jobs created through our mineral plant, through people like myself, through what Jess does, which is all the technical side of it. We have somebody working in the legal aspect. We have a finance person. We have another technical person. And we also have a designer. So we have multiple jobs, and as the company will grow, so there will be more job opportunities. But also then we have supply chains. Okay, so the supply chains then, Cenin will look at where we can source things from, where they can be sourced locally, they will be, or they will be as sourced as near as we possibly can. So there is a real collaborative approach with other organisations to make sure that we're trying to work closely with communities and to listen to them. And we do this through our commitment to local communities. So we've come up with a sort of a standard that we work to, which promotes these 6 key areas. No, I'm pressing the wrong button. Okay. So our commitment to nature and biodiversity. So this is a really, really important one. A lot of people feel very, very passionately about the environment. I run, in my private life, I run an environmental group in where I live in Neath. Okay, so we're really concerned with looking at the environment and making sure that we look after it, both in biodiversity terms and everything that we do. So within Cenin, all our developments go through stringent planning controls. Okay, and we have to liaise with certain experts to get their opinions, to have things measured, so that we know what we're doing is not damaging what is already there. So we often work with the natural environment that's already there. So that's habitat, the wildlife, the flora on the project. And we do this by using habitat management plans. So just as you would have a woodland management plan, you would have a habitat plan for these areas. So that means then that they would go in and they would look what is already there and how that can be improved on. okay? Because often development doesn't mean that things have to be taken away. It means that things can be improved. So we use horticultural experts to improve the habitat. So we may go in and we may say, okay, that we would like to create wild meadows. We would like to create more woodland. We would like to create habitat for insects and other small mammals, which, as most of you will know, will then feed up the food chain. So we do this through a number of ways. We do this through working with professionals who are in that remit, but also we look at traditional heritage working practices, which I'm quite passionate about because it keeps these things alive. So we use recycled stone from the sites, and we use skilled craftsmen to create dry walls for habitat creation and wildlife corridors. As you're probably aware, wildlife corridors are so important. When you have housing developments, often if corridors, green corridors, are not taken into consideration, my background is planning as well, you can often sort of, if a species is in one area, it will stop them from migrating into another area. You need that green corridor. That's what hedgerows are for. That's what field verges are for. So we look at things like this and we work with what we have and to enhance it. We on Stormy downside, we've got dry walls there. So you probably know that insects love to, just as children and a lot of people now have bug houses and bug hotels in their gardens. Naturally, how this would happen is dry stone walling. I mean, going back 40, 50 years, you would see dry stone walling all over the countryside. That has been taken down through farming practices, et cetera, and development. But dry stone walls are so important for insect population and pollinators. So we really do look at the ecological aspect and work with that. Then we look at the local economic benefit, because obviously we want to make sure that the communities are benefiting from the developments. So we do this through employment opportunities. So as Jess said, now, when a development starts, we will have a certain amount of building work. We will have a certain amount of infrastructure to go in. And we will have a certain amount of initial work to do. And apart from that, it's all the experts that we use. So when a company goes into the planning application, and I have sort of been the other side with planners, there is a whole array of experts that a company needs to use. That's all jobs, okay? Then when the development is up and running, maintenance. So often with renewables, the good thing is that maintenance is minimal because these technologies are very, very efficient, but it still provides long-term employment for local supply chains. What I was just saying to you about habitat, we have people working with us long-term on developments who are actually looking to maintain the habitats that's there long-term and constantly improve it. It's not something that's over when the development finishes. It's something that we are always looking to improve. This is another one that people, are quite concerned about, but we look at improving countryside access, because often people think that development means we can't go there. It's off bounds. We can't access it anymore. But at Cenin, we look at ways of creating paths, cycle trails, so that people can move about where we're developing. Okay, so I haven't visited many of the sites with Cenin at the moment because I'm quite new, and Jess will know more. But on some of the developments that I've worked on before, you can often, there's one in Ammanford, because I used to live in the Ammanford area, you can actually cycle around the mountain top where the turbines are there. Okay, so there's no restriction of access. There is when it's obviously being built, but once it's built, the community can use it for leisure, just as they've done before. This ties in with commitment to education, because we work with the sites to promote not only raising awareness of what's happening on the site, so we have interpretation boards showing what's in the site, But also we look at sustainable modes of transport. And how this works is that if we have a development, we look at how that development can be best used if there is something that's local that needs to be accessed. So that could be a stately home, or it could be something that somebody visits. And the word has gone from my mind, what I'm trying to think of. An attraction, sorry. So if there's a local attraction, rather than drive into the attraction, looking at how people can park away from the attraction and then use more sustainable routes to the attraction, because then that takes away the congestion and the honeypot experience that many places, as you probably are aware, experience. So we also, this is something that I think is really important. We support local clubs and associations. So part of our commitment to the communities, we have a commitment to the community fund, okay, and it's building community wealth. So what this basically means is that we can fund perhaps smaller organisations that wouldn't normally be able to access or wouldn't know how to access money. Okay, so it could be that there is a small organisation. I'm going to give a sort of an example of a singing group that is there for people, perhaps people with, like my mum has vascular dementia. Okay, it's important. It is so important for so many reasons. It's so important to bring people together. The isolation agenda now is huge across all generations. So I'm really, really passionate about this today, bringing people together. And we can look at small groups that need funding to continue. Okay, so what may be a small pot of money to a large organisation could be the difference between surviving or not surviving to a small group. And this is something that I'm currently working on, is that I'm sort of working on looking at what groups we can support. Okay, so there's a pre-operational fund. So what that means, and if there's questions around this, Jess would know more about it, but a pre-operational fund means that until the development is actually up and running, it's not producing money, okay? So, and it's a long, lengthy process. So the pre-operational fund is a small fund of money because it's put up front by the company. And that way we can work with organisations to create a relationship so that when the development is up and running, there will be a sort of a second round of funding. Okay? So this basically brings people together for health and well-being. And that is so important on the agenda after coming out of the pandemic, where we've all been isolated from each other. So whether it's a local music group or somebody that needs transport costs, my mum, I just said now, has got vascular dementia. She's 84. Her whole life stopped for 2 years. And now that we're finally coming out of a pandemic, the bus that she used, the community bus that she uses, no longer is running. There is no funding. So my mum is now stuck. There is no means of transport. If the company, the charity organisation had something like this that they could feed into, my mum wouldn't be stuck in every day. So for me, I'm really, really passionate about helping the smaller organisations. And at the moment, that's what I'm currently working on, is looking at ways of connecting with these smaller organisations of need in the areas of development. And this is sort of what I do. Okay, so I'm an educator, basically. I've been in teaching now for a long time. I often say, and my husband's a teacher, that working with children is easier than working with adults and animals, okay? So for me, working with children keeps me young and it inspires me every day. And I've literally been brought on since September. Jess did this previously and did an amazing job. I don't know how she did it on her own job as well. But I've sort of taken the lead now on education. And I'm inviting schools, organisations, businesses, groups, anybody that will come and see what we're doing. I love taking people around, showing them the technologies, explaining why it's so important. I like hard questions in terms of if people don't like it, I want to know about it because it's a conversation. We need to have those conversations. So we have basically, since I've started, we've had about 7 schools in. And I had, like I said, year 3 yesterday. But I had Bryn Tay Comprehensive, which I don't think is far from here. They brought their whole of year 7 in, 290 pupils. That was good, wasn't it? So for 5 days, we had all of their year 7 that came in. They asked me some very challenging questions. I had my wingman Jess to answer all the technical things. But they were really, really enthused about the technology. And why this is important is because, you know, I'm coming to the end of my career, okay? I'm thinking one day soon I'll be joining a university of the third age because it looks brilliant after what I've spoken to Malcolm today. But there's a new generations coming up and they've got to do things differently, okay? My generation have not been great. I'm 50 now, and I can honestly say that my generation are consumers. We waste. We don't think much about the planet. And I'm really hoping that the generations to come will really think differently about how we do things, but also they'll come up with new ways of doing things. They'll be able to invent the technologies and the ways to save this planet, because that's what it comes down to, is saving the planet, okay? Or at least making it better to live in than where we're going at the moment with climate change. So it's really, really, really exciting for me because I'm working with organisations. Please, I've said to Malcolm today, if anybody would like to come down for a visit again, if you haven't been, you know, please arrange a visit through this if you'd like, or just give me a ring. And I'm more than happy to have a visit even on the weekend. Okay? I just want to show basically what Cenin is doing. So we're building the Wales we want for future generations. And it's all about the new electric economy. Okay? We've done things by fossil fuels now forever. And fossil fuels, they're running out. I used to lecture to not on a sustainable development course, but part of a building course, so part of surveyors. And I used to get builders coming to me and surveyors saying, yeah, it's not going to run out. And I used to be, yes, it is going to run out. Oil will run out. And when it runs out, we need to have something in place. So green energy, green electric, and especially with the electric, is going to be a game changer. So we're going to have more electric vehicles. We'll have more buses. We'll have more cars. We'll have more modes of transport that will be in the electric sector. And that means then that we need to get power for them. And so we are looking at things like electric vehicle charging points, designing systems that are joined up so that if there is a place where we all need to be in A, that we can charge the vehicles up to get to B. Not that we've got to go to B to charge the vehicles up and to come back to A. Okay, so it's all about, in sustainability, it's all about joined up thinking and green power. And that brings me on to this. So I feel like I've got my my council hat back on now, okay? So the Wellbeing and the Futures Generation Act in 2015, it's really all about long-termism. And I'm really excited about that because when I worked for the council, it was all about short-termism. It was all about 4 years' time. And it doesn't work, okay? So this basically was developed to ensure a joined-up approach. It's about improving the social, economic, and environmental and cultural well-being of Wales. And the Act is a strategic document that takes a more long-term approach than previous legislation. It works towards developing a prosperous Wales, making sure that we have a vision that we can adopt by 7 well-being goals. So we have a global Wales, a responsible Wales, a prosperous Wales, a resilient Wales, a healthier Wales, a more equal Wales, a Wales with cohesive community, my passion, and a vibrant cultural Welsh language. Now, I could talk for an hour on this slide, okay? I won't. But, you know, this is so important that we go forward with this cohesive approach, because we are going to be looking at poverty, health and equalities, job and growth. And everything that Cenin does, we sort of look at these principles and we try as much as we can to put our developments around this. Okay, so this is really something that we are passionate about. So we're going on to our projects. So Park Dyffryn is that the nearest one to here? No, the Bridgend.
Park Dyffryn is a solar farm we've got down in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's currently in the design phases, but it is shortly going into planning. So what's great about this site, I won't go into it too much because I think there's one a bit more relevant to you lot. But what this is great at is it's going to be a very big solar farm. So it will produce a lot of power, and that will go into the local area down in the Vale of Glamorgan. It's very close to Dyffryn House, which you may be familiar with. We have worked a lot with the National Trust who own Dyffryn House to complement what they're trying to do. So they're fully supportive of the scheme. And what we've actually done is we've taken ownership of 2 fields near Dyffryn House, which aren't actually National Trust property. But what we're doing is we're actually keeping those fields, and we're going to utilise those fields in the way that National Trust want. So what they want to do down at Dyffryn House is actually turn the landscape back into what it would have looked like when the house was built. So it makes a lot of sense, but as a result they've asked us if we can turn the 2 fields nearest them into what it would have been back when the house was built. So we're trying to build this solar farm, yes, but we're trying to do it very sympathetically with what's already down there. There's a lot of archaeology nearby, so we've had to factor that in. And also we've gone to the route of creating paths as well. So through the solar farm, we want to create a path which is suitable for all mobilities. So it will be like a proper tarmac path. Firstly, the actual solar farm is in a really lovely area itself. It's in a very green, quiet area. And we think a lot of people would actually want to come down there, walk their dog, walk their grandkids, utilise the solar park. And why should you have a solar park which people can't go in? No, we want to actually show people this is the future. We want people to enjoy it. But what we've spoken to Dyffryn House about is we're going to create a small, very eco-friendly car park at the top of the site. And people who want to go to Dyffryn House can actually walk or cycle through the solar to get to Dyffryn House. We've had loads of conversations with them because they expect to have a lot more visitors and they don't have enough parking. So we've sort of complemented each other. So this is a site which we're very passionate about, and it is going into planning June, which is really exciting. What a lot of people don't know is something I wanted to touch on, which Joe doesn't know about, is schemes over 10 megawatts go to Welsh Government, and Welsh Government take a year to decide. So that adds a year on to our timelines. When I first look at a scheme, it probably takes a year to know if that scheme is viable to go ahead. Once you know, yes, we're going to go ahead with this scheme, you've got 2 years of surveys. So you have 2 years of bird surveys plus everything else, ecology, archaeology, topography, drainage, you name it, we do it. And then you go into the planning, and Welsh Government take a year to decide. And then you've got to get the grid connection lined up with the planning permission, with the delivery of the turbines, or solar, which have been affected by Brexit, by COVID, and now by war in Ukraine. So from us thinking, okay, this area could work for solar or wind, it takes 7 years till that wind turbine or that solar farm is operational. So when I say about Bridgend Borough want to be net zero 2030, you've got to have those schemes in mind today to make that possible. So it is very much a tricky goal to try and do, but it's something we are trying to do and trying, we don't want to miss these targets, we need to hit them for all the reasons Joe has said.
And And I've got a few facts here which I found. The electricity demand is set to double between 2019 to 2050, from 308 terawatts to 627. And this is due to part in electrification of transport and heating, but it's also because obviously we're going to be burning less fossil fuels. And this is obviously, the way that we're doing things at the moment is extremely damaging to the environment. So it is about looking at different ways of doing things. And when we talk about the solar panels, they are at a low level height to minimize the impact on the landscape. And I was talking to, the Malcolm, some of the other people earlier, that we have sheep. Sheep quite happily will graze underneath the solar parks. Wildlife will live alongside a solar park much better than a housing development. Okay, so basically these developments that we're putting in, once they're in, they're minimal in terms of impact of what's going to happen with them. It's usually one or two people at certain times of the year doing maintenance work or repair work, but it's minimal. The ecology and the landscape is allowed to get on with whatever it wants to do, basically. Okay. So we've got Cardiff International Airport. Do you want to say a bit about this, Jess?
Yeah, so we work quite closely with Welsh Government, and we got the opportunity to look at a solar farm down at Cardiff Airport, which was really exciting for us. It's something we've never done. So what we've actually come up with is a 1 megawatt, so it's quite a small very small in nowadays scale, a solar farm. And what we're doing with Cardiff Airport is we're actually connecting the solar farm to the airport. So all the power needs of the airport, lighting, machines, everything we need can be powered by their own power on the solar farm, on their own ground. So it's a win-win for them. So this is something which we're really proud of. We've spoken to all the local residents who live around. We actually do part of what I do, a lot of consultation. So all of our projects, we talk to local community councils, town councils, groups. And what we did down there is we spoke to local residents. We actually did a sort of meet and greet opportunity. We gave out a brochure. And the general response was that everyone was happy with it. We'd factored in that the field we're putting the solar, a lot of people tend to walk their dogs, etc. So what we've done is we've actually put a nature corridor, as Joe said as well, it's extremely important, around the solar so people can still utilise it and basically do what they normally would. So we organised online, because obviously COVID times, we organised an online meet and greet. Anyone who's got any last minute concerns, anything like that, nobody turned up. So that usually is good news because it means we've answered as many questions as they have. They had no concerns. They know where we are. I mean, we're in Bridgend. We're not exactly far, if they want to come up and see us. So that was really great. So we are hopefully going to build it this year. Obviously, we've had delays as well, COVID, etc. So, yeah, hopefully we'll be building it this year. And it'll be great that Cardiff has a bit more to it because I know they've been hit heavily with COVID with aviation. But it should reduce their build by a heck of a lot. So hopefully Cardiff Airport has a really bright future now.
And I think that's really important as well because, it's like schools basically. Their energy, they eat energy. An airport will eat energy. So they will private wire the energy from the renewables into the Cardiff Airport. People have asked me, why can't private wire, can you just explain a little bit about private wire?
Yeah, so what's very frustrating for us as a developer is we're a developer, we're not an energy supplier, and people sometimes get them confused. So we produce the power, but we can't actually sell it to domestic homes. So we produce the power, we can give it to the grid, which is National Grid or Western Power Distribution. We give it to them. They then have their own agreement with, Octopus, British Gas, etc., who set the rates. So usually we don't get a huge amount for our power, but that is sort of the set amount we have to run off. If we private wire, we can get more for our power. So it's quite confusing. But say you're paying, normal people probably pay under 14 pence a kilowatt. But we would sell the power to that company who sells it to you for 14 for, say, I don't know, 11. So we're getting 11 for it, they're selling it to you for 14. If we private wired, we can maybe come to an agreement of, say, 12. So Cardiff Airport, for instance, could be buying it from us at 12, which saves them money and gives us more money. So it's an all-round plus. But we can't give to individual houses because it has to go through the National Grid network, unless you're an exception like a big industry, so like Cardiff Airport. If you're a big manufacturer and you've got a big facility, then we can actually look at private wiring to that, and obviously saving them money and we get a bit more money. But it has to be the right sort of situation. So, and private wires, they cost a lot of money, so you don't want to take them a huge distance as well, which also adds complications. So something we do, which other developers don't do, is we'll actually look at a site to go, yeah, we're putting wind there or putting solar there, and we'll look at what industry are around it. You could, for instance, do it to a school. So we are looking at a lot of schools. We're looking at a lot of hospitals in our areas, and hospitals, again, eat power. So we try and look at how we can actually utilise the local power better. Other developers would literally just come in, put a wind farm there, all the profits go probably abroad to where they're based. But because we're local and Welsh, we want to create as much benefit locally as possible. So we do look at creating these connections so people get cheaper power, we get a bit more, so we're happy. And it actually keeps money in that area. It's not flying out, it's kept within the valleys or kept within the borough. So that is something we spend a lot of time doing, which adds a lot of complication, but it is for the best. It is the best option.
Yeah, and I think that's really important.
Excuse me, if you wanted to put solar panels on your private house,
Yeah.
can you do that with your support or not?
We don't do domestic, so we only do commercial.
So how would you go about it then if you wanted?
I personally, if I was doing it on my house, I look at recommendations, just if any of your friends have done it or anyone you know. I believe the maximum you can domestically is 4 kilowatt. So I think that's the maximum you can put on a property. What would be interesting is, so with solar now, usually you build it south facing because the sun goes east to west. South facing is great, but you end up with a peak midday because that's when you're creating the most power. What people find now is you can actually do east-west. So you get more power in the morning than you would if you just went solar, and you'd get more power later on in the evening because it's when the sun is setting. So your overall amount of power you get is less, but you get a flatter kind of output, which I would contemplate. If I was going to go solar on my roof, I would contemplate east-west because I'm not usually there in the day, I'm in work. So I would do it east-west, so I would utilise the power when I'm having breakfast, and I would utilise the power when I come home if I put the washing machine on. So that is sort of very, very new thoughts behind how to utilise solar better, is when are you actually going to use it. So if you're retired and you're in your house a lot, solar probably south-facing would be the right way to go. If, like me, I'm not that much in the daytime, I would probably go east-west. So I would talk to local, domestic PV suppliers and see what they say. I mean, it depends on the orientation of your roof as well.
And also, they've got things like ground heat source pumps are huge now at the moment. We're looking at one of those as well. My husband's looking at anything to get off gas at the moment. But the problem is that you have to have a lot of work done outside, so there's got to be a lot of trenches built. But the next new thing that's coming out as well for houses is air pumps, and they're very, very expensive at the moment. But they said within 5 or 6 years the price will come down considerably, and that will have less need for building work, and they're literally something that can be plugged onto the house.
Can I just ask, why do you always, anyway, these last 2 projects you've talked about, you're putting the solar panels on the ground?
Yeah.
Why can't they go, as with Cardiff Airport, up on the roof? Because surely it is far better to put things up on a building than it is to put them on the ground where you're actually devastating the environment.
Cardiff Airport is on the ground. It's not on Cardiff roof. It is on a.
That's what I mean. So it's wrong, isn't it? Shouldn't it be on? Why can't they put it up there? Look at it. It's loads of space up there. Put it up there.
I think in the future a lot will be on roofs. You can also see them integrated inside the buildings. The issue is the amount you need wouldn't be sufficient for a normal roof. So Park Dufferin is 65 megawatts, so that is thousands and thousands of panels, which most roofs aren't that big enough for that. But what we do is I like to say we don't destroy the environment. One of our solar farms, which has been running for a good number of years now, down in the Vale, what's fantastic is it's fenced. So you can still walk around it, but you can't walk physically in between the panels. And what we've done is we've kept people out, and people tend to be the worst at destroying nature. By keeping people out, it's been fantastic in terms of nature. We've set up wildlife cameras. We've seen foxes, herons, hedgehogs, you name it, it's there. We've actually put in ponds, we've put in hibernaculars, bird boxes, bat boxes.
So your biodiversity has gone through
Oh
the
yeah,
roof.
yeah. The only person who is allowed to go in that solar farm other than us is the local beekeeper, who asked if he could put his hives in there because they're not going to get vandalised, and the biodiversity in there is fantastic. So he is the only person allowed in, as well as Cenin, and he will go in, sort out his hives and leave, and it's a serene place really because humans aren't allowed in there. So yeah, I understand your point. We are very, very cautious about the environment. We've actually got, as Joe said, sort of an expert who can build dry stone walls, plants loads of trees, builds ponds, does everything sort of above and beyond. So that is something we do push.
The private wire projects,
Yeah.
presumably those still have to be connected to the grid because the renewables won't be available all the time. Is that right?
So you can have two connections. So what we do is it depends on the capacity of the facility as well. So if it's a factory and it takes 5 megawatt and we've built 7, then they would take the majority and then we'd export the rest into the grid. So you would still have a grid connection, but you would prioritise power to go to that factory because you'd get the most benefit out of it and they would get the most benefit out of it.
Can I just ask this lady, because she
Yes,
wanted to ask something?
I'm just wondering, what about the covering of our good agricultural land when we also need to grow food? And where is that going to go if everything is, and especially the best land, being covered by solar panels?
Wales isn't predominantly a crop orientated land, okay, because of our weather, basically. So we're usually sheep farmers. Wales is predominantly sheep. Some cattle, but not much crop because of the amount of rainfall that we have. So for Wales particularly, there's low biodiversity in green fields. Okay, so greenfield sites are low in biodiversity generally, except for the margins around the outside, and you've got the hedgerows. Now, this is, my personal opinion, that often these greenfield sites are looked at from housing developers' points of view because they can put 500 houses on them, make an absolute fortune and take all the hedgerows away. And I have, before I came to work for Cenin, I have been involved in a lot of planning against them, okay, because they do decimate the environment. With solar panels, because they are actually, sitting on the ground and they can be taken away with minimal impact. So if they were ever taken away, you're not actually destroying anything. In terms of once they're gone, the grass is already there anyway. The grass will grow under a solar panel. The impact is minimal compared to something like housing development. And so for me, when I'm looking at, like you said now, food security is what you're talking about really, is obviously in other parts of the country, like Cambridge, where you've got flatter and you've got more crop growing, you might not have so many solars, but one interesting fact that I found out, which was that Wales, for some reason, I never believed this, has got the highest iridescent percentages in the whole of Great Britain. You wouldn't think it in Neath, where I'm from, because mostly it rains. I think you've got better weather in Porthcawl, but we have some of the highest iridescent levels, which is better for solar creation.
Park Duffer in our site I work a lot on down in the Vale. My MD literally spoke to me yesterday and said we've got to make sure panel height is a metre. So they're piled in, so they're literally just pushed into the ground. And the bottom of the panel has to be a metre off the floor, and that is so sheep can graze. So you might have seen on some of our photos we've got sheep underneath. Park Duffer, they will be grazing, no doubt, they will be grazing under the panels. And the farmers love it because it means if it's a really, really hot day, they've got somewhere to shade out the sun. If it's torrential rain or it's really cold, they've got somewhere where they can sort of shelter together. So it is, I totally understand your point, but a lot of developers might come in and just solar the whole thing without thinking about that, but that is something we do think about.
Well, of course, if you're a farmer in a very small farm, you might find you make more money out of your panels than you do out of the food and the crops and the creatures. But that is, there's more to
diversification.
We need to have a lot of resources, not just the electricity.
We get a lot of farmers saying my single farm payment is coming to an end in a couple of years, and they want to diversify because being a farmer, it is a tough life. Martin, our MD, used to be a farmer, realised there was no money in it, so went into something else. But we do have a lot of sympathy for farmers because it is tough, and that is why we do look. I get a lot of inquiries about farmers saying, can you put a turbine on my land, can you put solar? And they want to get extra income. We've got a farmer on one of our schemes. He must be probably 70, similar age to what age your group starts. And he needs to retire. He's like, I can't physically keep going. He needs to retire, but he doesn't have the money to retire. So we've put in a planning application and we've actually got approval to put 2 turbines on his land. Now he'll get a good income from that, which means he can retire. He can then get help or give the farm on to another generation who then can farm the land. So, we are human, we're developers, but we're human. We do have a lot of sympathy for farmers and we do try our best to see what we can do on their land to help them out.
Could you tell me, how are you funded? Are you government funded or how do you create your income?
We are funded by the MD. So Martin Popham, he used to be a farmer, he went into cement, he's got a lot of experience in land reclamation, quarrying, that sort of thing. So a lot of the upfront cost comes from himself, so it is a lot of risk for him when you're forking out a lot of money for these projects. So the newest turbine which went on Park Stormy, the slightly bigger one, that was completely funded by him. So he puts a lot of upfront cost into the projects. If they are multi-million projects, then we do get external funders coming in. Welsh Government, they've never funded us, as far as I'm aware. We work with them on projects like Cardiff Airport, but we haven't had any funding. The Eco House on site, some of you may have seen, that had funding from the EU, but obviously we're not part of the EU anymore. So yeah, it's one of those things where...
So Cenin is in fact funded privately?
Yeah.
Yes, it is, yeah. And it's hard to get your head around. A planning application for a big scheme could easily cost $500,000 or more, and that's a lot of money to put out, and you don't know if you're going to get planning permission. So yeah, the realities of the situation.
What does Cenin mean?
It's daffodil in Welsh.
Sorry?
Daffodil in Welsh.
Daffodil, yeah, I didn't know that.
Funnily enough, it is spelt wrong
Right.
because the MD is dyslexic.
Oh, right, okay.
So that is why.
All right.
Yeah.
The next couple of slides, we're coming to the end, may be of particular interest to you because it's the development in the Bridgend Energy Hub. I think it's a really exciting development because it basically looks at the electric economy. It's looking at the future. Okay, so we've just talked about wind, we've talked about solar, we've talked about why we need them. We've talked about, like you said, Cenin is a private company. When I was sitting in the planning department all those years ago, I didn't realise how much money developers were putting up front to put these schemes in. And also, I'm really passionate about Cenin because they are local and they are Welsh. So like you said, they're not coming from another part of the world. They're on our doorstep.
Yeah.
But this one, if I ask Jess to tell you something about the Bridgend one.
So this is a new scheme. You won't have heard of this, which is why I wanted to come down and talk about it. So this is what we're calling Bridgend Energy Hub. So this covers sort of north of the M4, so not immediate down here in Porthcawl. It's more sort of Sarn area that way. But actually you could see benefit, which would be fantastic. So what it is split into 4 elements. So first of all, we've got a solar farm. So we're hopefully putting, if we get planning, a solar farm by Hoyleq. We've already spoken to the local community councils, local residents. It's now coming out more in the public domain. People are aware of it. We make sure they're aware of it because we like to know their opinions. So we're building a 30 to 40 megawatt solar farm up there. We also want to build a wind farm on Minidega Common, which is sort of Black Mill, that direction. It will be on estate common land, but it will also be hopefully on land of 3 farmers. So as you said about farmers, 3 of those farmers can then retire, which is something we're going to be chuffed about if we manage to get planning. And both of these schemes, so the solar will power 12,500 homes. The wind, we've actually upped it now because we think we can squeeze in an extra 2 turbines. The wind will power 45,000 homes. So these schemes will produce a lot of power. And we need to use that locally. As I've said, let's use it locally. Let's give it to industry who can create more jobs, for instance. Let's try and give it to local people. So what Cenin are doing, we're going to build, hopefully, a transport hub off Junction 36. So sort of the opposite side to where MacArthur Glen is. There's land which is common, which it's basically wasteland. It's not grazed, it's not utilised, it's just there. We want to build a transport hub. The idea being that it will reduce people's transport costs. Obviously, fuel prices have gone astronomically through the roof. And what we want to do is create a transport hub. Now, this is hard to picture, and even I struggle to picture this because, 5 years ago we didn't think we'd be in a global pandemic. Now I'm suggesting to you a transport hub, and you're thinking, what is that? So the transport hub will be fantastic. It'll connect to Sarn train station as well. It'll connect to active travel cycle routes. We will have car charging there. We could have bus charging there, taxi charging there. We can then hopefully, we're talking to Bridgend Council, we could have depots of their fleet vehicles there. Could have companies like Royal Mail, for instance, charging there, Natural Resources Wales. We're keeping it open. And your idea is you could maybe get rid of your second car if you've got 2 cars. You could have 1 car. And we predict the future will be, you'll have your phone and you'll have an app. Everything's an app now. You'll have an app and you'll go, I'm here, I want to go here. Literally within 2 minutes, a car could pick you up and take you to the hub. You could then get on another vehicle with more people and maybe go into Cardiff for the day, go shopping. And it'll be more convenient, it'll be cheaper, it'll be there and then. You won't have to wait for a bus, which probably won't turn up. So what we're thinking is, it's got a long way to go. People won't be using this. As soon as we build it, there'll be a few people using it. A lot of people tend to park on the verge up there, where they should have a car park to park and car share maybe into Cardiff or Swansea. So we think initially it'll be used for park and shares, maybe a few people charging electric vehicles, but we want to put that there for the next 50 years, and it's very hard to predict the future. So we're already in talks with different people about what could go there in the future when there's demand. Hydrogen vehicles is becoming quite a big thing, especially your heavy goods vehicles potentially going hydrogen because they've got to travel long distances. So we are extremely excited that that could benefit a lot of people in Bridgend, but not even just Bridgend. I live in Swansea. On like a rugby day, trying to get into Cardiff is a nightmare. So I would literally go to this transport hub, meet a couple of friends, jump on a multi-vehicle, electric, hopefully car, go into Cardiff, drop us off, happy days. Minimal effort, minimal stress. So we really think that that transport hub could be huge for South Wales and for the people living locally. But also, it'll be fully powered by our electric, which we can produce because we've got the wind and the solar local. So we will private cable that down. And also, if hydrogen, for instance, you're thinking, okay, well, where's the hydrogen coming from? We can actually use green power to separate water to create hydrogen. So there are loads of options there, and we can't predict the future, but we're just seeing what's up and coming. The green power coming from the solar and wind can also go into our employment area. So a lot of companies approach Welsh Government and saying, we're thinking about coming to Wales with our big factory, our big industry, which will bring a lot of jobs. Is there anywhere near the M4 we can go with green, cheap power? And that is a tricky question because no, there isn't really. So what we want to do, because there is the demand we've heard from Welsh Government, is we want to put a facility, high quality facility, near Junction 36, it's literally just off Junction 36. We want to put 2 buildings there, which will attract companies, businesses to the area. They will want green power, which is cheaper. Everyone will want cheaper power, won't they? So we want to attract that there. Companies could save $1 million a year by going for green, cheaper power than what they're currently paying. So there is that massive incentive to come to the area. And by doing that, we put jobs in the area. There's a lot of people, especially up the valleys from the San area, who they need jobs. You know, everybody's looking for maybe a bit of income. So I think that is huge. And a lot of people have said to us, okay, well, we don't want the church hall painted. We need jobs, we need money coming to the area. And that is what we're trying to do. So it's in early days. The solar is the most advanced at the minute. They're all hopefully going into planning in the next year or two. But this is something which is super exciting. Also, Bridgend Council are heavily supportive of this, to the point where they've actually factored in the wind and the solar into their energy policy network for Bridgend. So they're extremely supportive, and we're talking to them to see if we can also power hospitals, etc. in the area. So this could have huge benefits for the electricity could go to local homes, absolutely, but the real sort of money savings will be if it goes to hospitals, local industry, which will promote jobs and that sort of thing.
So it's all exciting. I mean, when I came on board and I found, I listened to Jess talk about this particular project, I think that it is so multifaceted and it is so joined up and it is so forward thinking that basically the sky's the limit, So, and I think that it's really important when you look at development. It's not looking now, 4 years or 5 years. It's looking at 10, 15, 20 years in the future. So as we come to an end, I'm just going to say thank you for being such an attentive audience. I haven't done one of these for 2 years, so I've been shaking up here. It's far easier sometimes to talk to 30 children, for all you teachers in the audience. You've been wonderful. Thank you for inviting us today, and thank you for being so welcoming. And thank you for settling my nerves. And any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you.
Battery storage?
Yes.
You could link up part of your answer to a question around the airport, could be the use of battery storage.
Yeah.
The same with your south-east-west.
Yeah.
If you take peak solar production during the day, can you put it into battery storage?
So we've got 4 megawatt battery storage at Park Stormy already. Park Dufferin, we are factoring a 30 megawatt battery storage. We will probably put in battery storage at the travel hub I spoke about for Bridgend as well. But yeah, Cardiff Airport haven't mentioned battery, that they want that from us, but they might do in time. So yeah, it is something which I think is going to come massively. So our battery storage at Bridgend, it actually balances the Bridgend grid. So basically what that does on Stormy is you can get fluctuations in the grid which can cause power cuts. If it goes above 50 hertz, you could have a power cut, you could have a fuse in your TV blew. So what that does is that actually keeps it stable. And I think a lot of towns and cities will have them probably on the outskirts to stabilise the grid. But yeah, they can also, as you said, store power, and you can also sell it later. So if you store power, you can actually sell it when you're going to get a better price for it as well. So we do look at battery storage for a lot of our projects.
Joe mentioned earlier.
Linking into that, any thoughts on 12-volt DC power rather than 240 AC power that we have? Because countries like Australia, I think, are moving more towards that. They actually have a heck of a lot of solar power dependence in Australia.
I haven't heard anything. We do obviously have a lot of conversations with the National Grid, WPD. I haven't heard anything about that changing, but I'm not an electrical engineer. So, yeah, it would be interesting, but I don't know if that would be quite disruptive. I wouldn't know, unfortunately.
Can we visit the site?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Park Stormy, you can absolutely visit. Also, the solar farm at Hoyle Q, we do, for a lot of our schemes, we do open days, where people can actually come onto the site and we can point things out and say why we're doing things and they can ask questions. So, yeah, feel free to come up to Park Stormy, you can book in with Joe.
Yes.
And then we've got some open days we will advertise for the solar as well.
When you say visit the site, not as individuals who don't get
Well, what we can do is, because I'm sort of developing this now since September, and I can envisage more people wanting to come up and see it, not just schools, is I will leave, well, I've got, Malcolm, you've got my my details. So what you can either do is you can either have a chat as a group and decide whether or not you want to have one of your visits up at the site, or if we've got enough people, we can do it in a day, or we can do it on a weekend. So what I will do is I'll leave it with the University of the Third Age in the first instance for you to have a chat about. If there's just one or two people, then yes, please take my details off Malcolm, give me a ring, and then call up, and I'm more than happy to show you around the site.
I noticed a reference early on to one of your projects at Home Farm. I was just wondering what that refers to.
Home Farm is the site I mentioned with the fence, which has got huge biodiversity and sheep under it as well.
Sorry, which Home Farm?
It's down near St George's. It's near Culverhouse Cross.
Oh, I was thinking of Tithixton Home Farm. So.
No. So that's 3 megawatt, so it's relatively small nowadays.
Could I ask, just on that wind turbines, we're all used to seeing them, and we're used to seeing solar panels down people's houses. Is it feasible in the future that we could have mini ones on our chimneys or something to generate a few kilowatt hours? And I just think that, they would be unsightly. So could I have one in my garden, which is small, but which could be like a tree or something? Has anybody developing this?
Yeah.
If we all did this, this would save a fortune. It must be feasible, surely.
Or a little
People are
windmill.
complaining about the noise though, aren't they?
Yeah.
We can't, not me.
We've got a mini one on your house or a chimney.
But there's also, people complain about, the view. You should be thinking that with the cost and the high prices, what does it matter about the view? Just get them up.
So
I'm not thinking about having a huge one in my garden. One, because we're all used to seeing sort of TV satellite dishes. You could have something like that attached to your house.
It's microgeneration of energy. And back when I was working for sustainability in the council, this is what really, would be me back then, our vision is basically some sort of non-intrusive way of creating energy, which we see with the solar panels now. But like you said, we literally used to say a wind turbine on the side of the house so that you are utilising all of the resources. I know that Jess may know a bit more about this. I know if you're going to put a wind turbine in the house, I think it's actually quite stringent planning still. Is that correct, Jess?
Generally, small turbines fall over.
Right.
So, don't know how else to put that really. So we build large wind turbines. Firstly, they're large because they produce a lot more power, which I can go into. But secondly, they're more stable. They've got better foundations. They're more secure. There's little ones, which you could actually go for planning and see if you could get planning approval for one in your garden. But they tend to fall over because they're quite light, and obviously storms are getting worse nowadays as well. I know Cardiff Airport they did put one on a building in the university, sorry, did I say Cardiff Airport? Cardiff University did put one on their building in the university and it blew off. So I think it might be worth chatting to maybe see if there's a company which does small ones and maybe see if they've got any reviews or anything like that, just to, because I do agree with you, it would be a great idea if everybody had a little one, but it's just the durability and how well it lasts, and you don't want to put all that expense if it doesn't.
I think they will. I think this will definitely come in the future. Just as we didn't think 20 years ago we'd have solar panels on top of our roofs, and in Pembrokeshire, where my husband's from, most houses now, new houses, are being built with solar panels on them. Okay, so all developments in Pembrokeshire, the Pembrokeshire Council have taken it on board, not in the Neath and Batal, but in Pembrokeshire, that they have to have solar panels. So I think that the technology will be developed in 5 years even, where we will have microgeneration on our houses. I think it's an amazing way to go, so that we have that,
Yeah, in a way there already is, isn't there, with the air heat pumps?
Yes, of course, yes.
And the £5,000 grant that's starting in April now, that the government's providing for those people that decide to do it now.
Yes, yes.
So it's
It is
all
starting,
running actually now.
Yes.
You don't have to wait for 5 years. Once we get the ball rolling, it will develop very.
It's the type of technology that's available now. You buy your mass boilers still. So it's all about the advancement of the options that you can have.
Can I ask about your house that's there? Is it a prototype house for people to come and get advice from how to do it, or is it just purely for you to house your offices?
So Cardiff University wanted to build it as a prototype, so it's the only one really of its kind. So that's why it's not used for people who live there, because one of the conditions was you can't live there, which was ridiculous if you're building a house, but there we are. So we use it as an office. So the idea was to see if the mechanisms they've put in, so they've got an air source heat pump, for instance, whether they work. And we could then test it on a daily basis because we're there pretty much every day and test it. We have had builders come in and go, I'm going to steal this idea, which is fair enough because that's kind of why it was built in the first place. The general principle of the house is it works very well. The only issue that sort of builders are finding is because it's timber frame and it is sort of the first of its kind, getting a mortgage on it is quite difficult. So the main issue isn't the construction, isn't any of the technologies, it's the banks. They like your normal brick house, slate roof, done and dusted sort of job. So that's the only thing, is that the mortgages are a bit iffy. But I know there are people who are looking to build them, and I mean, running costs, you produce your own electricity on the house because it's got solar on the roof. You've got a battery as well to store it overnight. If you're an electric car, you can power your car from your own house. So the only bill, there's no gas in the house at all, the only bill is water. So it is
It's amazing.
exciting for a lot of people. I've shown people around and they go, I want to buy one, and I'm like, okay, well that's a bit tricky, but I think it will come. I think it's just time.
Apparently, I was speaking to the person who, the lady Jo Patterson, and she was saying, so she's sort of the lecturer in Cardiff University that was involved in the whole of this. And she was saying that Bridgend Council have built houses with elements, okay, so elements of what they are seeing in it, they have used it in their new builds, and they're also using it in their, their ex-council house stocks, when they do their renovation of housing authority, local housing authority houses, they're using these principles to upgrade the houses. So they might not be built in its entirety yet, but they are definitely using parts of the technology.
In the Mediterranean countries, most houses or towns have a water heating solar panel in the tank on the roof.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering why we don't use that, because it's more efficient than photoelectric, is it not?
Yes, in the UK, yes, solar thermal is more efficient than solar PV, that is true. What they've actually done at the Salsa House, the one we use as an office, is they haven't gone down the solar thermal route because they want to utilise electric, so they've actually gone down an air source heat pump route. So I don't know if you've been to the house, but you're welcome to come up and see it. They've put like a black box on the south-facing side, and it's got little holes in it. The idea being the black box heats up in the sun, and air is pushed into it, which then warms up. That warm air coming through the house goes through a heat exchanger, so any warm air coming out the house from kitchens or bathrooms isn't lost, you still retain that heat. Then that goes to heat the hot water first, and then it can heat the rooms after that if needed, but it's got pretty good insulation. So that then heats the hot water. So in that instance, there's no need for solar thermal. They've gone down the air source heat pump approach, and then they've got electric from the solar PV on the roof.
But why do these Mediterranean countries just use the water heating rather than electric?
So they've got lovely weather.
The prices of PVs and thermals historically have been very different. So it's often been much cheaper to put your hot water cells on rather than your heating cells. But as the prices have changed all the time with supply and demand. So I think that's had a huge sort of impact on what people choose. So where I'm living, people are still historically have got the heating, the hot water ones rather than the PV ones.
I think it depends what your house is like and what you want to use it for. So like I'm lucky enough that I've got an electric car, so I would probably go down the solar PV because I can then charge my car from the roof. But also if you've got ground, you could look at ground source heat pumps. So I think it depends on your particular situation.
Right.
Can I just say solar thermal are superb.
Oh, brilliant.
They save you a heck of a lot of money. They work very, very well. We never paid for hot water between the end of March till probably the end of October.
Wow.
We had 2 on our roof before we moved to Portugal. The other is, if you want to find out about mini wind for your house, there's the Centre Alternative Technology up in Machynlleth.
Yeah.
Now, they have them there. They're mostly made in Canada, and they were very, very efficient. And they had a lot of different examples there in Machynlleth.
Yeah, a great place to visit. Well worth a visit.
Yeah.
When Sally asked me to do this, I didn't know that I was going to walk into answering, and I agree that solar panels are fantastic. We've had them for years. We've paid for them probably twice over. One weakness is that the company who installed, first of all, the roof ones for water went bust. And then the company that did the rest of it has gone bust, and actually getting anything from maintenance now is extremely tricky. It's working fine, but I don't know what I'm going to do when it doesn't. Because in that field, I'm afraid, there are or were quite a lot of cowboys.
Yes.
What we have here seems to me to be so different, so professional, so dedicated. It's inspiring. I think, ladies and gentlemen, we have just seen the future.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have just seen a brilliant double act.
Thank you.
Joe and Jess, or Terry and Tina, I'm not sure. But anyway, I think it's been inspiring. When I say seeing the future, we've seen a future that, and it's very good that we're seeing a future that we're not going to reach, a bit further ahead than current most government thinking or politicians thinking. The real thing, and thank you very much, it's a privilege to be near you and to have heard you and to be thinking of coming to see you.
Oh, thank you.